and it's a great pleasure for me to introduce David Mach tonight. He's got a fantastic body of work to show us tonight, and I'm sure you all know David Mach is a fantastic artist, but he's also a wonderful person. So he's got artistic accolades coming out of, well, as he might say, well, I won't say what he might say, but he has everything you can think of. The art world has given him. He's been nominated for the Turner Prize. He's a Royal Academician. He's got umpteen awards, but he is so down to earth, modest, approachable, and a hell of a funny, actually, and very easy to get on with. So I'd just like to, he's been teaching with us for 2 years now in our bigger picture course, postgraduate course. And I would say that every single day of that teaching has been an absolute pleasure to have him. So I'd like to say that. So he's, I have to say, he's a true force of nature. And I just want to also put a little bit of a sweary warning on this. We haven't got a bleeper. So if you get any small children around, just be aware that some sweary words might come out. And it's a bit like Billy Connolly. It's kind of funny. So it's quite hard to be offended. So anyway, I look forward to this talk very much. And thanks very much, David, for giving a talk. Looking forward to it. Cheers, bye.
Yeah. Am I on?
Yes.
I'm on. I thought you said I had a great body for a minute there. I thought this was a great body of work.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm sure you are.
Well, welcome everybody. This is my third talk now. I've been watching Adrian and Hughie last week, and they've been really interesting. So hopefully you'll find this interesting too. Well, I guess we should go straight into some images, really, so I can sort of concentrate on those things. Now, I'm only here we go. There you go. Yeah. Just go straight into the first picture you find there, Andrew. Yeah. Get past that, yeah. I'll ramble around a bit. There's quite a set of slides there, quite a set of images over quite a set of years. I'm not in chronological order. I'll dance around from decade to decade and come back and go forward and stuff. I wanted to start with work that I made when I was a student in Duncan and Jordanston College of Art in Dundee, which to me, I didn't know it was such a great college, but it really was a fantastic place to be for a student. Run by masters, the courses were really great. You were 12 hours a day teaching in those places. I had a great time in Dundee. A fantastic place to live. It was so cheap. You could I said somebody. I did say to somebody once, I lived like a king in Dundee, and somebody said, "Is that actually possible?" But it was a great place to be. But still, even when I was at art college, I found myself with great teachers, with great people to talk to, with studios to work in, with materials, all those things. Great advice, great encouragement. And it's still hard for me to figure out what the hell was I doing in art college, and what would I do? What can I make here? And I would find that getting out of the art college was the way forward there. So we'd be taken out randomly by various sculpture lecturers and sort of let loose in a park, or in this case, this first slide is me working in a wood yard near the college itself. But we'd be out there for a couple of weeks, and we'd be just picking up loads of material and working with that stuff and playing with it, making these big things that weren't permanent, that weren't stuck together, that weren't nailed or screwed. They were going to be tied or woven or something like that. You're using your hands and just working hard all day, making these large kind of installations. And I didn't know then that was going to be a big thing for me to be involved in for the next 2 or 3 decades. I'm just kind of playing around with this stuff. If you go to the next slide, you can see a kind of a baskety thing on the left there. I'd found all this skinny wood lying about the place, and I was determined I was going to make this massive cloud-shaped thing with using these uprights as a structure to this thing. And I was kind of fascinated by the size and scale that I could use in this place. I couldn't do that in the college. In the college, I had to sort of take things through doors or get things in lifts or stuff like that. They were kind of reasonable size things, and I realised that from very early on, I didn't want to make anything that was considered reasonable at all. I wanted it to take over the studio. I wanted it to be too big to get in there. I wanted it to be too big to get out. You know, so I was thinking of those kind of things, and I guess the reason for that would be where I was brought up in Fife in Methil, where they were building just in the roads for me. They were building oil platforms that were massive constructions. You know, and actually everywhere that around me was a kind of just had a huge involvement with industry. But I grew up sort of 2 doors away from a brickworks. I fell asleep every night for the first 18 years of my life listening to the rumblings of the kilns. We had the docks to the left, the oil platforms just to the right of that. We had the power station at the back of us. We had a bing, which is the Scots for a slag heap. It's a much nicer name, virtually coming into the house. So everywhere I looked when I was a kid, I was surrounded by people beavering away and making huge things. The first jobs that I got as a student, actually before that as well, I'd work in factories and mass production places. I'd work in a whiskey factory where you were watching 500,000 bottles go by a day as whiskey was bottled in that place, and everything involved huge numbers and excess and extravagance. And I wanted to have that. I mean, it must have come up through the soles of my feet. I was drinking it with the water or something, but I wanted to have that same extravagance. And when I went to art college, I enjoyed first year. You're doing, you're drawing, you're silversmithing, you're sculpting, you're painting, all that stuff. But as it went on, I'd work in Fife in some big yard where we were constructing a massive thing. I'd go to art college and I'd get there would be a guy whittling on a stick in one studio, you know. And I was always quite disappointed with that as well. So I had to get back in again. So if you go to the next slide, we had another escapade out in a park. As students, this is me in my 4th year or something at art college in Dundee. We've been to a couple of wood yards, but exhausted that. We go to a park, Camberdown Park in Dundee. The place is beautifully orange. All the leaves are falling down off the trees. And I'm kicking them up and thinking, well, I'll use that as my material. You know, I'll use this thing. And it was the first time I used one object, one material, one thing, thousands of times to make a sculpture. You know, I mean, I'm making a carpet here. I very cleverly photographed it in black and white so that you couldn't get the kind of, all the orange, and the black and white was serious for some reason. That was a bit stupid. So I love this. I spent 2 weeks in the park making this thing, and I hung it between a couple of trees. I think there's a slide there, an image that showed that in the next one. So there's a bar there hanging between those 2 trees. And when I started to weave these leaves into wire mesh, I brought a roll of wire mesh to the park. I'd spend the whole day weaving this thing. And it was a bit boring in the first place. And I put a bit of wood up there. I thought, I'll just hang it off that bit of wood. But it looked terrible. You know, obviously the thing was I had to make it big enough to actually stretch up into the canopy of the trees itself. You'll notice I was too lazy to take the bar down. It was just too bad because it kind of spoils the photograph. But I loved making this thing. I was out of the college. I was in the park. I felt that, for myself, I was making huge artistic progress making this thing. And I was talking to people. I was actually meeting people in the park. And I was getting quite cocky about it, where I'd actually say, "Excuse me, madam, would you like to look at my sculpture?" You know, which was a crazy thing to do, really. You know, and people would run away from me. You know, they'd be quite you'd make them quite nervous with your presence there. But somehow this contact with an audience, because when you're in an art college, people are being nice to you. The art teachers are being nice. Your colleagues are being nice. You're being protected. You're being looked after. You're being nourished. Being outside of that was a bit more kind of dangerous in a way. Somebody might say something bad, you know, and I really I sort of relished that thing, you know. There's a couple more images of this thing. Let's have a wee look. Yeah, and maybe if you go on a little bit, Andrew. Yeah, yeah. See, I got bored of hanging it straight down between the two trees, and I slung it across the path. I remember, for just to make a difference. I'd kind of done the thing. It was done, 2 weeks of an installation, or whatever you want to call it. And I remember that day, a wee Scottish guy in like a flat cap and a coat tight sort of around him came up and he said, "What is it you think you're doing, son?" Like that, And I was infuriated by it. What is it I think I'm doing? I think I'm making a piece of hot avant-garde here, pal. The guy was old enough to be my granddad. And he says, "Oh, really? I thought you were making a bridge for the squirrels." And he just buggered off. And I remember sort of that put there was the first, there's my response from the public. If you go on to the next, I don't know what we've got next. Let's have a look. All right, this is jumping quite a way ahead. This is quite a recent thing. This is in Kirkcaldy in Fife, where I'm highly amused to find that instead of on Thursday nights clapping for the nurses and the doctor, in Kirkcaldy they meet on a Thursday or Friday night to boo Boris, which I think I'm going to try and start that where I live here now. I'm going to boo that son of a bitch, But this sculpture actually sits in the promenade in Kirkcaldy, and it's made up of a series of chunks of wood that I found on the beach between Leven and Largo, which is this beautiful, gorgeous, white sandy beach. So it's got all these great kind of trunks of trees and marvelously shaped things. It's a beach that I grew up on as a kid. I've walked it 1,000 times. I picked up things. I did everything on that beach. But, I had my first assistants on that beach when I was like 4 or 5 years old, with a group of other 4 or 5-year-olds trying to dam the little streams, the burns that ran out of the golf courses onto the beach. And I couldn't move these big stones that were lying there by myself to block the burn, to block the stream. So I'd take my pals there and say, if we all get around this stone, we can actually get this together. We really damned them, and they flooded the golf courses and we were chased away. But I lost a lot of friends that way, because every time we go anywhere, Dave, you make us work, So, but they were my first assistants. This thing is made with several pieces of wood, and it's got something like 300,000 nails hammered into it. If you go through some of the slides, Andrew, you'll get a picture of this thing. It's a funny looking thing. Wow. It's not representational. It's just an object. I mean, I quite like that image. There's it's kind of Gaudi-esque there or something, But trust me, I've made this. We put it up in Kirkcaldy as a kind of public work of art. You go to the next one, and a whole bunch of things happened to this sculpture to the point where I had to take it back down again. So that's the first time in 40 years I've ever actually had a sculpture that's failed. They would have to do it in Kirkcaldy in Fife, just a few miles along the road from where I come from. So my name is Mud in that town at the moment. I've got to replace it, but I've got plans for that. But I think I love this. The effort of this thing was completely bonkers. Pulling 15 bits of wood off the beach, putting all those things together, making it as one, and then I've been miscalculating this kind of metal covering of those shapes by 200,000 nails. It was completely crazy, but there's something about me that needs to have that excessive, extravagant process involved in the thing that I'm making. So I love the thing, but it's the ugliest thing I think I've ever made. It's not a bonny thing. And in Kirkcaldy, they just sort of laughed their socks off at it, and then they laughed their socks off again when I had to take it away. And they're waiting now, to have a replacement. So maybe they'll have a David Mach there where they can be. I think there's a couple more images there. Yeah. So there's a kind of variety of the nail, copper, brass, different things that sort of lasted in different ways. But unfortunately, it didn't. The thing started to kind of haul itself apart. But it was part of a whole set of work. If you go to the next one. And this is another chunk of wood, the brown part of this thing is another chunk of wood I hauled off the same beach. And I hauled it off that beach, took it, and I mean, hauled it 450 miles. That, along with 4 or 5 other pieces, carved out the rotten wood. And this one, it's not nails. If you look closely at it, you'll see that it's covered in self-tapping screws. So if you go through some of the images there, this is just me halfway through the thing. There's something like 150,000 self-tapping screws in there. So I'm making a kind of a metal jacket for the thing. And you get this, if you stop there, Andrew, you'll get this elaborate shaped thing that I must have walked past this chunk of wood for about 8 years before I picked it up and took it away. I thought, it's interesting enough for me to get back to the studio and do something with it. The shape of it is just an amazing thing. There's no way that I would carve that. I've got to find that as is. I need to, the sun has made this, the sea has made this, the rain has made this, the salt has made it, the sand has made it, and I take it away, I carve it to dead wood, and then still for me, it's a crazy thing. When you cover it with that amount of material, you now think, well, there's something wrong with me. This is not kind of a creative, but you've just got another, you've got an ism where you've got to kind of cover it with all this stuff. It's not so much a talent as a kind of a problem, but the result of it, at the end of it, as it goes far, I think there'll be more pictures of it yet. Let's have a look. I don't know if there's a finished one for this thing at all or not, but yeah, I mean, there's a good close-up so you can see how I'm using the wood that I found and covering it with that skin of screws. And it looked, when I finished this sculpture, after all that kind of natural stuff happening to it with the sun, the sea, the rain, the sand, and so on, there's me covering it with that stuff, and it looked like a meteorite in the end. Like it had just come through the atmosphere and landed on that beach. And I'd love to have little kind of sparks coming off that, and little kind of blue flashes and smoke. It feels like that kind of thing. It's a bit like a kind of a lump of coal that's been in the fire for a long time that kind of welds itself back together again. Something like that, but a massive version. If you go on, yeah. So there you go. There's a finished shot. That's called dark matter. Yeah. So yeah, you can imagine that tumbling through space and traveling through the atmosphere and hitting that beach. Quite the thing. Next one. Same thing. Same beach. Same another chunk of wood. I tried to find out what these things were. Although I'm not sure that that's terribly important to me. I'm not carving them out as a wood carver. I'm not doing that thing. I'm treating these as found objects on which I can perform this other kind of a function. This time I've taken, I think it's 500,000 carpet tags. I've just started, in this image, I've just started to cover that thing. Tacks are very small. The wood's very hard. It takes quite a long time to kind of make this thing work. I've carved it out again, got rid of the dead wood. You can see the shape of it, it's kind of extraordinary. It's like a huge tooth that's been pulled, but it has that same meteorite thing about it as well, And there must be a repeat process thing that I need to perform in my life. And I need to do this to make something. 1 or 2 is not enough. 2,000 is not enough. 20,000 is not enough. 200,000 is not enough. I've got to make this with 500,000 things with those items. There's a rhythm to that stuff, I think. There's something to do with the rhythm that has affected every single work of art that I've made since I was a boy in that beach. There's something to do with that. There's a beat that works its way through these things. It's very hard to kind of talk about. I think when I made sculpture and I had exhibitions and I made installations and I made enormous things all over the place, I always wanted those things to appear to be live. I wanted there to be a performance element to all that stuff. I wanted it to be like a band on a stage. I wanted it to be performed in a way like that, which would be impossible. If I was standing in the middle of a room hammering nails into that bit of wood, it doesn't feel like that's somebody sort of singing along to a tune that's played on a guitar and that's reinforced by drums and other things. But that is absolutely that live feeling. I found that I got kind of addicted to that very quickly from art college and on into working in galleries, museums, and different spaces. That made it so much more interesting than working in a gallery where you've just got a work of art sitting there on its arse doing nothing very much. There's something apparently wrong with that for me. There's this one's called Full Metal Jacket. And there it is, finished. And I'm doing a lot of those pieces. I've got 4 or 5 of these big objects to deal with over the next sort of 6 months for a show in London. But I mean, going from there to this is the next thing. This next installation is called Incoming. This is a kind of this is what we did for the.
So David, a quick question. Someone's asking how big are the wooden pieces of wood with the Full Metal Jacket and
the Full Metal Jacket's about 1 metre square, something like that. The other one, Dark Matter, is maybe twice that size. So they're pretty big. They're quite big pieces.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. This next piece is an installation. I've started making these installations again. I made them for like 2.5 decades all over the world. And I stopped doing it because galleries wouldn't let me interfere with their physical space. I wanted to kind of break through walls and make holes, knock things down, and smash windows and all sorts of stuff. And they kind of balked at that. But I've gotten back onto them. This is a fairly recent one I made in Shepherd's Bush in London just a few years ago now, called Incoming. If you go to the first picture of that, it's made with about 12-15 tons of newspaper. It has various objects in the piece. There's a Jeep. It's a Jeep I still got. It's one of my cars. The wood you see there is groin wood. It's called the groins that go in, split up the beech. Beaches that you see in England, in the north of England, and so we have them less in Scotland. But the groin they came from a beach in Norman's Bay on the south coast. We've got a big packing case there that might have delivered some art. And this is a gallery in Shepherd's Bush. I forget what the hell the name of that gallery is. But and this is an installation we built in here over a couple of weeks. If you go through a couple more of those pictures, you'll see how the newspaper works with the objects. The objects are really important. If you hang fire there, Andrew, yeah. How I make the shape as the objects that I place within the space help me kind of decide where I'm going to have those forms flowing through. And it's a very kind of hard and fast thing. All those newspapers laid one by one, and you're creating shapes as you go from one object to the next, making it look as if something's burst out of a wall and lifted up objects and sort of carried them away. And I've made about 40 to 50 of these. This is a small one, 10 to 15 tons. I think the biggest was 265 tons in Madrid 20 years ago, something like that. But I'm enjoying making them again. I like the fuss of these things. I like the mess that it makes as I'm creating them. I like making them live so that as I'm making them, I'm talking to people who are coming in to watch that happen. You're actually, you're discussing things as people come in. They're watching you construct something. I can't make this and in the studio and then take it to the gallery. I have to be in the gallery. That's a particularly good shot of how this flow of newspaper, this flow of material works with the objects. They're not there for fun. They're there because they need to be there in order to help me make this action thing. It really wants for me to look as if it's still flowing. If you turn away from it to let it cigarette turn back, it might change shape, something like that. So, and I mean, I love making these things because of the effort that's involved. It's quite ridiculous. In fact, I was quite worried about starting them again recently because they were such hard work. I hadn't made one for 20 years. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm not sure that I can actually still do that kind of work. But it turns out that it's still possible. And we're planning more of those pieces. And I'm happy to do them because they're beginning to let me do things to the galleries that I work in. If you go on from there, I'm not sure where these slides go to, but they might go to the next installation. We can have a look at that.
Just two questions, David. Can I just ask two questions? So Gwen's asking if there is any glue involved, or is the structure freestanding? Any glue involved with the magazine?
There's no glue. There's no nails. There's no fixing. Gravity holds that thing. It's a very kind of interesting kind of engineering thing that goes on in the making of it. Because obviously, I build them to be. I mean, people used to tell me, "Oh, you make these ephemeral things." They're not ephemeral. They're built to last. They're only there for the duration of a show. But if you want to keep it for as long as you want, it will still be there. We build them to last. But there's no glue, nothing to sort of hold them together, other than the way they're constructed.
Thank you. And Gabrielle's asking, do you construct intuitively, or do you use CAD or another software?
I don't use any computers at all. I mean, if I have a problem, if it requires electricity, that's me first.
Right. And Rosemary saying she saw the newspaper piece that Casa 2 years ago, and it was stunning. So you're getting lots of compliments on the chat.
Good.
So David, what happens to the material after you're in the gallery? Do you carry, because you mentioned quite heavy weights, 250 tons.
Yeah.
So what happens to the material when you move on? Do you move it from one gallery to gallery?
One of the reasons I loved making these things, I made these things back to back for years. So we would go and make one in London. We'd hot foot it to Barcelona. We'd go from Barcelona to Vienna. We'd go from Vienna to Tokyo, from Tokyo to San Francisco. And we just kept doing that and going around the world for quite a few years, you know. And the great, I would design these in my head. There weren't any kind of drawings or plans. And they would often say, "We would like to, hey, Mr. Mach, we would like to see a drawing of your sculpture." Yeah? I say, "Well, are you going to pay me for it?" And they say, "No, well, I'm not doing it. You just have to sort of trust me to kind of build this thing in your space." And I would go there and intuitively, somebody said intuitive. That's how I kind of found my way around the galleries that I was working in. And I'd be constantly fighting against people about this is far too heavy, this gallery can't take that weight. But I'd have worked out that it could. And so you'd be going through the process of that too. And I just pushed the limits of the thing as much as I could every time I exhibited. I didn't have a studio then, you know, and they would say, "When are you coming to take it down?" I get paid fees to put them up. And they say, "When are you coming to take it down?" I said, "Well, you're going to pay me to take it down." And they said, "No." I said, "I'm not taking it down, you take it down." And I would just walk away and leave that thing. And eventually, I made those installations. I think one lasted for about 5 years before they took it down.
Wow.
We put one up, we worked for 5 weeks on it with about 65 tons, and it was up for exhibition for 1 day because there was another exhibition coming in after that. And so on and so forth. You know, I've made them for TV, I made them for films. We made a big thing for a Vanity Fair ad, I remember, where they were able to use that imagery for that.
So just quick question. So would you adjust from what I understand, would you adjust the installation in accordance to the space that's available? Or is it a set piece that, right. Okay.
They were never set. They were all, I've got some images later on. You can have a look and you'll see the differences in these things. They changed everywhere we went. The objects changed. I tried to get the most extravagant things I could. You know, so in Vienna we were getting Hershey's. In Japan, I can't remember all the things, but we would try. I really love that actually when they'd phone me up and say, "What kind of what do you want?" You know, and I said, "Well, can you get us a plane? I want to put a plane in it." You know, or can you get us a cement mixer? You mean like those one of the higher ones that you do for your home? No, I mean the ones that you drive on the street with I mean, I remember driving. I mean, the guy who was driving the cement mixer, they were all laid on a core of pallets. There's a core of pallets underneath this thing with the wee ice, if you like, with the newspapers.
Yes.
And I remember the guy, he was driving this big sort of cement machine thing, getting panic stricken because he thought it was, because we were trying to drive things up at really crazy angles and make it really dangerous. And having to kind of take over with the driving and having a ball driving this thing up, I kind of mount the things. We're all moving at that point, but by the time we put all this weight on it, it sort of stays solid and is fixed, you know. So yeah, they're still for me some of the most fun pieces that I've made, and they're really kind of excessive. If you look at rock and roll in terms of effort and work, and it definitely has something to do with me being brought up in metal and all this work ethic there, and all the things they were making, all the miners digging at coal, all the fishermen fishing, all the metal workers making these huge constructions. Everybody was beavering away at a rate of knots that, to me, in my little pea brain as a kid, this is how things work. This is how things go. This is what you do. Being an artist,
So you have quite a big crew with you when you're making installations and all.
yeah, we used to take about, well, it would vary depending on budget. So we'd take like 8 people, we'd take 2 people, we'd take 5 people. You know, we'd actually get local guys to help us quite a bit. So if you were in, the material obviously was, we got that in Tokyo, we got that in San Francisco, we got that in Vancouver. We didn't bring it with us, so there was a kind of localized on-site thing that worked very well with those kind of efforts. I mean, the last time I saw Gwen Hardy's with us tonight, I made a very kind of a teeny version of one of these things for a show we did in Edinburgh. I'm sure I remember the name of it, I've suddenly forgot. Let's move on. Let's have a look at a couple more images. Yeah. There's me, and this is in where is this? This is in Galway, and I was not at NAG Galleries for years to let me make a hole in the floor. Let me make a hole in it so I can have this stuff bursting out the floor. Galway finally lets me do it, and that's for me. There's a progress there. Now, this is a space they're using for the festival. I don't think they actually even have this space anymore. I think they even have knocked it down since we've shown it. So we're kind of we get to be fairly free with the space. But it was an old newspaper work, so it's perfect for making this particular sculpture. You know? We've got a whole boat, a Ford Capri, a caravan in this, and all these wooden pieces that are kind of manipulated. The Ford Capri was very popular. I could have shown the Ford Capri and forgotten about the art completely. Everybody was just kind of happy with that. But you can see there's me. I'm actually under the floor of that space in this piece, having a ball, making it look as if it's the blood or veins or guts of this building pouring out, coming up into that space, you know. And I just kind of the effort of that was I mean, I was absolutely knackered making this thing. My brother helped me make that. Actually, my brother worked on quite a few of these things, but it was really a kind of a 4-man team. So over the years, over sort of many decades of doing it, where I'd have like 10 or 12 people working on some of these things, you were able to whittle that down to 3 or 4. My wife would come in on a lot of these things, and she was fantastic at working on them too. And I still want to make. I can't, I'd make these all the time. I'm actually considering now, with all this lockdown nonsense, not being able to get into museums and galleries, about making miniatures of these things with bus tickets and cloakroom tickets and stuff like that. You know? So that might well happen. Yeah. But you can see how the thing develops around the various objects. And again, you've got people coming in all the time, and you're having quite serious conversations. And you'll have daft conversations too. People will come in repeatedly day after day. They'll be there for a week, stand and watch me doing this thing. And they'll eventually pluck up the courage. They get closer and closer until you can feel their breath in the back of your neck. And they'll say, "What is it that you're doing?" I say, "Well, it's an art. This is an art gallery. This is an art festival. You come to see some art. I'm making a work of art. I'm making a piece of sculpture. And what is it you're using?" And I mean, you've got somebody standing for a week watching you use brand new material. It's not scrap. This is like I think this is like 20 tons maybe of newspaper, all in wrappers, all perfectly new stuff, all good stuff. So they've watched me use this. I have to rip sometimes. There's an engineering thing you have to do, and they'll say, "Oh, it's newspaper. Oh, I thought it was electric cable." Yeah, I think, "Well, fuck, really? Does that mean you've been standing for a week not actually looking, but pretending to look?" Or so you get there's a lot of that kind of stuff would happen in galleries. I'd have these odd conversations with people that wanted to be lovers of art, or sort of pay attention to that stuff, but were sort of unable to let themselves go well enough to think for themselves, thinking, well, what the hell is this thing? It's quite an odd thing. But that, making an installation like that allows me to make contact with the public. That's very, very good for me. And you can say, I'm a very hard man to offend. So we can, we can have a conversation about all sorts of things. What else have we got then? Oh my God, this is another jump. This is my degree show at the Royal College of Art. So we're talking 1982, and this is the first time I've used magazines as a material. And this is an image of a train going so fast, the smoke from its chimney swallows up its shape, and it makes up this big form. It's called Running Out of Steam, I remember. That's the first time I made them. I just made a Rolls Royce with the remainder books. I'd been in Wales to make that. Again, I'd had to get out of the Royal College. It's me, 3 years at the Royal College. I have trouble 2.5 years into the thing. Eventually, sort of thanks to some great advice from lectures from Brian Neal and a couple of other guys, I end up in Wales making that Rolls Royce, and then I find myself in the trail of this material. Running Out of Steam is the first train image that I used. And the minute that I did that thing, that I made that sculpture, I had an idea. Well, actually, you don't want to make a model of a sculpture. You want to make a model of a train. You want to make the real thing. You want to make it the same size as a train. So I had that ambition would creep in immediately. The next slide shows you a drawing of me imagining that train being made of brick, and the smoke from that brick train coming back up a hill, and as it goes back up the hill, houses begin to be revealed, and you build a whole row of terraced houses in the back of this thing. And it kind of in my head, it became that idea. And I'd be asked constantly, because I was working like furiously on a big number of things. Even then, I just left college and just started it. So it was a hell of a lot of work. Have you got any ideas that you're not able to make yet? And I'd spout out these things. The train would be one of them. I want to make this train. I'll make it with car tires. I'll make it with new telephone directions, but I want to make it life size. And, I'd have a discussion with somebody. And then I got a call, I remember, from some arts group in Darlington. We hear you have an idea for a train. Would you like to come and pitch that to Morrison's? So I foot it up to Morrison's because I hear they've got 10,000 quid to spend on making a sculpture. And they sit me down and they tell me, we'd like you to make a train that goes on the roof of the supermarket, goes on the top of the customers. I'm thinking, what the fuck? You think I'm going to make that? I don't think so. But I had this really funny conversation with them, but persuaded them to give me their 10,000 quid. And we made a bouquet. And then, so this next set of slides will show you the finished piece of train in Darlington. I can't even remember what date that was. But it was the first kind of big, sort of massive, permanent, we would call that, work of art that we kind of really got involved in. And I'm using we now because now I'm beginning to have quite a team of people around me. Like 8 or 9 people sort of working on various things because there's so many things going on. I eventually ended up between 20 and 30 and 40 people working on the sculptures. And, I had to stop that. It was getting crazy. But this project was very interesting. It was the first time that lottery money had just appeared. So lottery money was going to be available for an artwork, and we applied for that lottery money and got it and suggested making this piece of sculpture, you know. And I knew from my visits to Darlington that half the people up there, half the people who were involved in this thing, politicians, local councillors, guys like that, half of them really wanted to do it, but the other half really didn't. You know, so I would go up to Darlington with collages like this. So that's about 6 feet long, that collage. I tucked that under my arm. I could just fit it under my arm, I remember, on the tree. And I'd show them that thing. I'd show these people, everybody that I met. I'd meet about 25 people every time I meet them. I'd say, look, this is what it will look like. Because I'd made a model of the thing. And here are the people standing around it in the park. Everything's fine. Nobody's worried, you know. And I'd go away. And then I'd come back in 2 weeks to Darlington. If you go to the next one, and I'd bring out a kind of an even cheerier version of the same thing. So it got a little bit brighter, and I'd sort of pick out nice sort of sunlit skies, and we have people actually, looks like they're holidaying and picnicking by the sculptures as well. Nobody's got a problem, because I was still meeting this kind of opposition that maybe, you know, whilst those guys over there are saying, yeah, we're going to do this, those guys over there were saying, I'm going to try and make sure they don't actually do this. So I was trying to beat that thing, you know. I made about 14 of these collages in the process of this thing. If you go to the next one. Yeah, I mean, these are the kind of guys I'm sort of talking about. Where I spent my life at this point. I'd have about 20 projects a year, where I'd have to go to a town, someplace. Actually, not just in Britain, but in Europe as well, because I was part of a competition to make a sculpture for a roundabout in Ipswich or something like that. I'd walk into the room and I'd have my maquette, put it on the table. And in the first few steps that I walked into that room, I'd figure out who was up for this and who was not. You know, so I'd made this little collage on the back of that. You know, most of those guys are quite happy, but the guy in the far left is going, no fucking way are you building that in this town? You know, and he's the guy that pulls all the strings. So you can, you know, I really love the process of that. That also has something to do with growing up in method, where you had to learn very fast how to speak to people who were about to try and kick your head in or fight you or, you know, smash a glass over you in a pub or all those kind of things where you know, you'd learn how to talk, schmooze, run, joke, you know, puzzle them, the whole thing, right, just from saying 2 words, you know. So and, yeah, 20 times a year I'd sort of try to make these proposals for it. I'd maybe get 1 job out of 20. If you got an old-fashioned time and motions man to examine your business, he would say, dump the public art, Dave. It's not worth it. But I loved it for the meeting those guys and persuading them to make something, even though 19 times out of 20 I failed. But I'd be involved in using things I wasn't going to use otherwise. So the exploration in materials would be really interesting for me, you know. So there's a few more images of the train on it. Yeah, I mean, these guys are, you know, I'd say to these guys, look, these guys, they love their train, they love it. Fuck, they're dancing around the thing, you know. They're so happy. Yeah. Next one. Oh yeah, and there was a guy, there was a politician in Darlington who hated my guts. Yeah, with a vengeance. And I remember there was an article in a newspaper, local rag, saying, because when we designed the train, we had things called bat bricks put in them. Now, a bat brick is a little slot, and a little British pipistrelle bat can creep in there and form a colony in the kind of box construction of this thing. And so it was a kind of an environmentally friendly thing, you know. But this guy, this politician, said that this was a disgrace, that the people of Darlington will have any blood sucked from their veins if we build this sculpture. So I thought that was hilarious. And he gave me a reason for making that collage. I think there's even more. I couldn't stop making collages about that. I made a kind of I suggested having a kind of nude opening day. If you really wanted to kind of make a big noise about it, let's have a nude day. And so I sort of made this collage from old, what was that magazine called now? Health and Efficiency. you know. We called it filth and deficiency, as a matter of fact. Somebody stole that collage. Yeah. I wonder where that is.
Where was it stolen from?
It was stolen from Darlington.
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. Nice sky. Yeah. And this was the last one I made. It was because there was a lot of discussion about giving lottery money to artists to make things like this. Anthony Gormley was making his Angel of the North about the same time, you know. So all of a sudden there was money available for big projects like that, and people were saying, "No, that's not right to spend that money," you know. So I made this collage, but the gist of which is, this is what, if you give lottery money to artists, the Lord will wreak revenge and destroy the sculpture in a whirlwind sort of thing. So I like that kind of a vengeance aspect of that thing, you know. Quite, you know, 9 times out of 10, actually probably more than that, about sort of 20 times out of 21, I'll have an exhibition someplace, and that'll be the last time that I exhibit it, because we leave such a kind of a clearing up job when we go that they're not desperately keen to have me back. But Darlington asked me amazingly to make another big thing, you know, where the train sits on this road that you see in this image. That road was only a kind of a skinny carriageway, and they were going to widen it into a dual carriageway, or even a 3-lane motorway. I can't remember exactly, but there was a bridge across it that would need to be replaced. There was a bridge that you would have to be able to ride a horse across. So it was a bridle path. That's what it was. There was a bridle path cutting through that. So they asked me if I would design a bridge for this particular thing. And I thought, wow, that's one of the kind of jobs I was talking about, the 19 out of 20 jobs I didn't get, that kind of public art thing. Would you design a bridge, David? You bloody well, damn well I would, you know. So we set about making this thing, and I never told them the idea came from we'd made a collage, and we'd had to take a photograph of a girl with a blonde wig on for the collage. The wig was so cheap it was terrible, so we got rollers for the collar, for the wig, to try and kind of bouffon it up a little bit. And they were sort of pale blue like that, or pale pink, with that kind of construction in them. And I remember just sort of looking at one of them one day and thinking, oh, I love that. Let's just have that kind of cut across these 6 lanes. We'll put these big, heavy kind of machine-like things at the end to kind of weight down on a slight kind of incline as you go across, you know. And that was the idea for that. If you go to the next, like, there's a better image of the thing. And we made a quite expensive model of this thing to work it out. You know? It had to be big enough to ride a horse through. Remember, that was part of the design. And I would go to Darlington again every so often to discuss this project with these guys. And I'd go and meet these engineers, having sent drawings, sort of more kind of technical drawings. And I'd get there, and they would have changed the drawings and added pieces to the bottom and the top. And I would say, what are these things? Yeah. And they say, well, your bridge won't stand up, David, you know. And we had to add structural blah, blah, blah. And of course I went completely crazy, you know. And my first thing would be, don't touch my fucking drawings. You want to design it, you design it. But, you know, if you want me to do it, then this is the thing that's going to be. And in the end, you have to have a kind of another company come in and actually test my kind of drawing to make sure that it would stand up. It was fine. We'd engineered it perfectly well. But then they got really kind of sticky about, and they would say things. Well, you need. I mean, if you look at this image. They said to me, you need a handrail. I'm thinking, my God. You could lie on the floor of this thing and drag yourself along it with the things that you can get your hands on all the way across. Why the fuck do you need a handrail? You know, and not only a handrail, David, you need a horse rail too. So I'm thinking, sorry, a horse rail? You're expecting sort of like 2 guys to sort of ride across, meet in the middle maybe, and get their spittoon out and sort of chew the fat like a couple. I'm not getting this, you know. And actually, it's funny because just up the road from this, where this bridge was going to be, because it was a real project, where it was going to be, it was only 500 yards away from a bridge that had a kind of low 3-foot fence, you know, with, you know, no handrail or any damn thing. But all those health and safety regulations had changed, you know, and they were obviously making it more and more difficult to actually sort of see this thing through. And they were very worried. One of the things that really got me, those big ends, those big circular ends, like there's some sort of machine, like there's some sort of cog. We're worried that people will climb up those and jump into the oncoming traffic, you know. And so I'm sort of like, oh, Jesus Christ, you know. So I go away and I come up with I think the next image has a picture of how we deal with that. I made this kind of internal kind of almost like a metal condom that stretched all the way through across the tunnel of the bridge and sort of stretched up and over the top of the sort of big circular ends. And I remember being at the meeting with those engineers and saying, you know, because I said I don't really like the handrails or the horse rails. I think that's quite ridiculous. But I'm concerned about people climbing up this thing and jumping into the oncoming traffic. So we're going to make this big skin that you see here with razor wire. So if anybody tries to climb up it to jump into the oncoming traffic, they're going to be ripped to shreds first, you know. And if that fails, then we're going to leave a sniper in the bushes to pick the bastards off. And I didn't get that job. Yeah, that was one of the number 20, I think, that I didn't get. Love making that. I love the idea of making a bridge, though.
Okay, I think, David, you're in the idea sounds good, but you're in the wrong country to present it with snipers.
True.
So, I think it's a pity. It looks like it would have been a wonderful project which could have brought in a lot of external income, like tourists. I can see people traveling to see something like this. Maybe you should try and mute it to maybe a place like China where they're looking for all kinds of projects.
Well, we still got those drawings, and you think, I mean, I'm involved in making architecture now, and all of a sudden I think, hang on a minute, that idea is not bad. In fact, I threw that maquette out, and now I'm regretting that. Because I'm thinking, oh shit, we should have kept that. It might have been available for some other thing. But for a sculptor to be asked to make a bridge, goodness sake, you know, you're not going to be able to turn that down. And I laugh at myself for the way that I deal with the people who are involved in these projects. Because I just don't have any time for kind of messing about. This is the design. Don't tell me something's wrong and when it's not. Yeah, and I think there's an assumption because you're an artist, you're not going to know about these things. But after sort of decades of building things with loose materials that will stand up and be climbed on, and so I know how that stuff behaves, which is a strange thing because I mean, when I was at school, you know, I was a shit student. I remember failing all the kind of engineering drawing exams and so on. I remember them laughing at my engineering drawings. Beautiful drawings. I had no relationship at all with the figures they gave you. You know? I got all the figures. I made these lovely elliptical things. You know, so this is maybe part of that thing. So I'll hang on to that and hope that one day one of you guys is going to be on horseback riding across, looking for a horse rail to sort of pause.
I think. Annette's asking, did you tell the engineers it started with the hair roller?
I never did. You know, I chickened out that one. That's pretty bad, isn't it?
And Marlo's asking, is it all collage or are some sections painted?
That's all collage. I mean, actually, if you go back a couple, or just one, I really loved that collage. I bought a couple of Salvador Dali posters. I mean, from doing the train, I started to really kind of confuse anybody who wanted me to make a sculpture for the outskirts of Edinburgh. Because normally an artist would come along and he'd make a drawing, and there'd be some people in it, you'd get a scale and so on. I started to make things that were, and here's the country and western version of this sculpture, where I'd have cowboys riding around the sculpture. I just confused the bejesus out of them, but it came from working on the train collages. This one has Salvador Dali posters blended together, drawn over the top of the building of the bridge itself is a picture of the model made, and I've collaged in the foreground and the cars and the road and so on. And that was to become a massive feature my kind of studio operation, you know.
Okay.
Let's go forward a little bit. I don't know where we are with the in terms. Oh, come on, there you go. We're on to architecture now. Unbelievably, I find myself working on. Actually, I've got 4 projects going on at the minute. But this is the first one. This is called Mach 1. Now, I didn't name it. The architects I'm working with gave it that name, so I'm very happy about that. But I can't get anybody to believe that it's not some sort of conceited kind of a title for it. But this is a building that's going to be built in Edinburgh, very near the airport, at the end of this year. We're talking. We're on course to do that. It's made with what looks like about 30 to 32, 38 steel sea containers. Now, these are objects. Sea containers are things that I used many times when I was making sculpture, and actually all over the world again. But starting off in Kiev, we made a sculpture with containers there. We made a massive one in Edinburgh actually with about 145 of those. And I keep coming back to them. They're a great object, a very, very significant object, very important to us as people on this planet. They've affected us in all sorts of ways. Very recognisable. You would not recognise one of these. And I was asked. I was working with some people who were working with architects, and they wanted a new building with containers, but they were getting all the same ideas. And they said, "Have you got anything?" Of course, yeah, I do. So I made a model of this thing with Baco foil packets. And from there, we've actually found ourselves working with the architects in London, Dixon Jones, and a set of engineers in Manchester to work out the kind of gubbins of this thing. And it'll be together before the end of the year, and it'll be a marketing suite for the company up there that's bought something like 1 million square feet of land, and they're going to have this marketing suite. They'll have offices, they'll have houses, and a variety of other things. It sits near the tramway that runs in and out from Edinburgh Airport to the centre of the town. So I'm very, very excited about that. I'm an accidental architect. If you go to the next slide. Next image. I'm still calling them slides. That's pretty bad, isn't it? So you'll see how if you look at the sort of middle to the left, the bulk of that is a building which has an interior, which will be used as a marketing suite. And we're thinking that it will probably become a venue for comedy or something like that, like a comedy club or something, or theatre. You can certainly have exhibitions in it. So you could have a multiple use, so it could have a long life this time. And it's very kind of it's a crazy shape. It's kind of like a kind of pickup stick, so a kind of Jenga thing collapsed. But I worked it out very carefully with my Baco foil boxes to make sure that it would actually go together. And it will operate as a proper building with heating and lighting, and be ventilated. We have lifts in there and all sorts of things. So it's a real thing. Go to the next one. These are kind of obviously computer drawings of it. Yeah. Nothing sits in a straight way. Everything's kind of slightly kind of wonky, to make it look as if it's getting ready. It's kind of, it's almost, it's getting ready to fall apart. I really like that aspect. It kind of grows out of making those big installations with newspapers as well, I used containers the very, very first time to make a Greek temple with car tires, about 6,000 car tires. We had 4 20-foot containers, 40-foot containers in the Middelheim Museum in Belgium. And I wrapped, we used that as a kind of just a platform. And we wrapped those 6,000 car tires around that construction and made the temple. And I made that several times in different places. And it occurred to me at the time that the box itself is kind of like a Greek temple anyway. It has those same sort of long girth like that. It's got gable ends and the same sort of fashion. And even the ribs along the side of the thing are a bit like pillars, so it has that kind of same sort of design feeling about it. very kind of special design. I'm slightly obsessed with actually, that's not fair. I'm obsessed with a lot of things. Go to the next slide. Yeah. So that's just taking you through various shots of that. It's really, I mean, it's interesting working with the architects. You see, we've never had to bother about what it looks like from the top before, you know. So you can actually sort of get above this. And it has a different look every angle. So it's very sculpture. It's very much a sculpture as much as it is a building. It's well, you can see them in the containers are about 8 foot square, so you kind of understand the scale of the thing as well. And we're on to if we stick with the building for a minute, we're on to design a skyscraper for an outfit in Silicon Valley in California. I'm working with an architect, Michel Zayat, in Syria. We're building a new university in Syria, and I've designed a big chunk of that. I'm talking about designing a house for a client in Arizona, and there's another thing, I forget what the hell it is. Well, yeah, maids using these things in Belfast in the Titanic docks. So all of a sudden, from one job like that, this is the kind of thing that you pray for as an artist. Here's my idea. Well, we love that. Here's plenty of other work. You really want to have that kind of reaction to what you do. So I'm very excited by that, and I love the scale. I mean, I'm working on collages in the studio that are only the size of a postcard. You know, and I'm making 500 of them at a time. But they're very, very small. The detail's very small. It's very kind of picky. I'm using little kind of surgeon's knives to make those things. And I'm leaping up to something that's 200 feet tall from there. And back down to making another worker. But I'm carving out wood now downstairs to make a new piece with nails and screws and stuff like that. So I really love that kind of jumping around. I'm hoping to get onto an installation shortly too. Although everything, because of this coronavirus thing, has kind of been put on hold, so I don't know when that's going to happen. But let's jump to the next image. See what it is. It's very odd doing this because normally when I do a talk, you'll get a reaction in an audience. You can hear it. You can hear them shuffling. You can hear them saying things. You can talk to them. You can kind of play around with that. I'm talking to my iPad. Very odd.
Well, everybody's listening.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
But, around that, I mean, this is jumping back again. This is a thing that Richard Jobson, the Skids, the singer in the Skids, had me do for a program that they were making called the Love Weekend, the Valentine Love Weekend. And they asked me to go in that program and make a sculpture. And I said, for the Love Weekend, what are you going to use? And we decided we'd use hundreds of condoms. And I'd make a bikini or a swimming costume on a naked woman live on TV for this thing, and it was around. I mean, for quite a long time, I found myself experimenting with materials like that. You know, I'd use lots of different. There's me looking very cheesy with my naked, lots of naked girl because I've made it a kind of a bikini, which is all I could manage in the theatre's live program. But you know, apart from that, you know, I didn't mind hanging around her. But I also really I love this guy. I must have been the only serious guy. That's how sad I am. You know, I'm actually thinking I need to make it a structure out of this and make it work and so on. I just didn't want to kind of truss this woman up in small pieces of rubber, you know. So I'm trying to figure the thing out. But at that point, I would get in touch with companies and say, hey, I'd like to make a sculpture with, and it would be a Cindy doll, you know. So I'd phone up, I forget what, Pedigree Toys, and say, hi, my name's David Mach. I'd like to use 400 Cindy dolls to make a sculpture. And I'd be completely taken aback when the boss would say, okay. And I'd go, wow, so I can have 400 dolls then. You know, and I just phone up companies and ask them for materials and sort of, you know, get angle pointers, lamps, and dolls of various kinds, teddy bears, shoes. I mean, huge rolling sculptures out of Clark's shoes. I had thousands of pairs of the damn things, you know, and I really loved that kind of playing around with it stuff. This is a bit daft, this project. And I remember being told, you know, I mean, I've been told loads of times in my kind of art, I was going to say career, but I've not had a career. It's just like a kind of set of things that have happened over the last sort of 40 years. Don't do that, Dave. Don't do that. You won't be taken seriously if you see you doing that. You know, and I've never, anytime anybody, this is a bit of advice. When people tell you no, just go ahead and do it. Right? Next slide. Let's see what we've got. This is a bit of a jump. That's a Rolls Royce of made of remainder books I've made. Go forward a lot and see what's there. This is me. This is like jumping back in time again. This is wow. This is like 1983 or something like that. And that's telephone directories. I made a kind of a Henry Moore using that as a material. I'd used the remainder books. And I was making objects. That's about 14 feet long, about 7 feet tall. That's quite a big piece. And I thought it was quite big then. I'd made about maybe 10 or 12 or 14 of those things in various places. I left art college. I found myself showing immediately in a one-man show in Edinburgh, I remember. Then I went to Rotterdam. I was in Paris. I suddenly started making work in exhibitions and having to sort of come up, having to deliver those things, you know, as performances on time and so on. So I was nervous then, having just left college, because I was 8 years in art college, you know, 5 years in Dundee and 3 years in the Royal College of Art. A free education, how fantastic! Fantastically lucky was that. Here's me out and about, making my first work as a professional artist, I guess, and wondering how the hell I'm going to make any money, and being terrified of that whole ordeal. I see that I've actually managed to pick it knuckles with telephone directories or something. I must have been right into that project. This is in Rotterdam. Again, this is like about a month after I've left art college. I've been making I remember this is soft porn. These magazines are soft porn. They've got me half a dozen tons of that stuff. And I'm making a tree. I was going to make a tree and have it look as if it had been chopped down. And as I'm making it, it collapsed. And the orange paper that you see there splashed across this very shiny floor and left this kind of slit in the floor, perfect for something to emerge like out of the water. So that was the first time I made an image of a submarine. And I'd make, maybe there were 3 floors in that gallery. I think I can't remember what I made in the other 2, but that would be in the middle. But that would be a success. It was a surprise to me what I made, rather than predicting what I was going to make something out of, which I kind of hated. Oh yeah, you're the guy that makes a Volkswagen, a telephone directory, or a Rolls Royce. I liked the images I was making. I liked the things I was producing, but I hated that kind of glib description of them as well. Yeah. Next image. All right, so I mean, we're into the kind of big installation now, but this is in Warsaw in 1985. Martial law. Poland's got nothing at that time. And I've got a show in the Foxhall Gallery, which is the only exhibition space in the whole of the country that's exhibiting artists from other countries. And I find myself having a show there. And it's the Pole, I mean, my dad's Polish. My dad was Polish, so I can say what I like it called. But the gallery, my God, were they snotty. They were intellectuals, and they would stand at the door and sneer at people trying to come into the gallery as if you'll never understand anything that happens in here. Fuck off, yeah. All that kind of stuff. So I made this sculpture in reaction to that, and it's a fireplace with smoke coming out of the fire. The fireplace is a kind of welcoming thing. Come in and sit by the fire. That kind of stuff. So it's a very small. That's only like 1.5 tons of newspapers. That single piece, I can't even remember what that was called. I must have had a name. Took them a year to collect the material to make that 1.5 tons of stuff. And I jumped from that to 30 tons. If you go to the next one, I'm sure there must be a kind of shot of Riverside Studios in London, which is the next image. Can we go there, Andrew? There we go. So I jumped from my 1.5 to 30 tons. Now I'm really enjoying myself. And I get real objects into the space. A real fireplace, real chairs and tables. And they are lifted up and carried about this space in the sort of 2 weeks that it takes us live to make this. And there must be kind of more images of that. And I'm just trying to find out how to use this material at that point. If you whip through them, I will show you some pictures of that finish. This is called Fuel for the Fire, this piece. And this started me and my kind of 2-3 decade long relationship with these enormous installations. This is me, we're in Barcelona now. We got invited to show a massive space in Barcelona, the Metronome Gallery, a private place. They're asking me what will I use, because I've used the fireplace in London. This is adding fuel to the fire. And I've asked them for a car and a truck and a piano and, you know, all sorts of stuff. We had a team of about 8 people there working on 45 tons. And every time I made one of these things, okay, 45 tons in Barcelona, I want 60 tons in Vienna. Okay, 60 tons in Vienna. I want 85 tons in Tokyo. Okay, you know, I got greedier and greedier and greedier for the size, and scale, and effort and performance of this thing. I don't know what the next one is. Same thing, Barcelona. It's a beautiful space. It used to be an abattoir at one point. This is a very, very weird thing. But again, we'd be making the live in front of an audience. They would come in. I think maybe we spent 3 or 4 weeks making this thing. They'd come in, they'd see a kind of big, huge core of pallets, and see us driving that car up onto the pallets, same with the truck, positioning things. And then they'd see our materials lying all over the place, and sort of neat pallets, brand new things, and us going to them and coming back and building with that stuff and making the finished sculpture. And you would always get that guy there for a week, waiting to speak to you, waiting to ask, what is it? What's this thing that you're making? And it's an art gallery. And what is it you're using? And it's, you know, they get the material going. So it was a very puzzling thing. It used to upset me quite a bit, that. I'm going all the bother to do this in front of you, and you can't bother to look and see what this thing is. What is that? That's a very weird kind of relationship we've got there. Let's see what else we've got. Okay, so this is later. This is like 1990, I think. Again, so 1990 was a pretty busy year, actually, because I remember 1990 was the City of Culture competition for in Glasgow and Edinburgh. Were competing in Scotland for that, and I was actually making sculpture for both cities. This is the tramway in Glasgow. This is 145 tons of the daily record, which they would deliver in chunks every day to us over sort of 5 or 6 weeks. We had a team of about 16 people. My wife was heavily involved in this particular one as well. And this time a very kind of straightforward set of columns, about 8 feet wide. They were massive, these things, just huge things. Very, very carefully built. No glue, no fixing, nothing like that. You had to be very careful how you got the kind of applied mechanics sorted out for this. So these things would fall down. And the sort of it was a kind of a Herculean effort, or an Egyptian effort. We built 12 of them, I think. And I remember when we finished them, I turned to my wife and said, "Oh God, I'd like to build 64 so you can get lost in here." And she sort of burst out in tears. Christ, do we have to do that? It was called Here to Stay, because I was getting asked a lot about why do you make these temporary things. And I didn't consider, and I don't consider now, that I was making temporary things. They were temporary because you didn't leave them there. If you left them, they would be there now. 1990, that sculpture would still be standing. 30 years later, 30 years later, it would still be there. We got this fantastic shot of this guy. It looks like a kind of Belgian postman wandered off the street there. No, I still don't know who that guy was. I'd like to make more of those too. They were really great fun. And they're very, we have a kind of tubular construction on the inside there. We'd buy massive cardboard tubing. They would use that tubing to make motorway legs, highway legs and stuff like that. And we'd work our way around that. And it's just, carefully make your way up to the top. You can't just do that. You've got to do this kind of weird half newspaper thing.
Has no building changed their mind and asked to keep them as a permanent?
Well, if it was a place that we're going to have another show coming on in a month.
Mm-hmm.
So you were there for however long the show was which didn't bother me at all. But again, I was asked, well, when are you coming to take it down? I'm not coming to take it down, not unless you pay me the same amount of money you paid me to put it up.
Mm-hmm.
So I would do that. I loved that aspect of it. Actually, I was leaving all these things lying about.
It was the best thing, David. It was the best thing that there ever was at Tramway. It was just fabulous.
Well, it was such a fabulous space that, God, I remember seeing it, like, holy mother. I mean, as a sculptor, you were dreaming of spaces like this, so you wanted to fill it. Let's fill this thing. What else have we got?
Could I just ask a wee question about the previous slide? Sorry. There's the other project, the car and the sculpture floating. Yeah, this one. Because I was just thinking there's a real sort of metaphysical sort of like the earth, the earth opening up and total chaos and anarchy and all these not everyday, well, the car is an everyday object or they're man-made things, there's a kind of upending sort of quality to them. I was just wondering if you could address that.
Well, I like to use things that you know. I don't have to tell you what a car is, I don't have to tell you what a chest of drawers is. I don't have to tell you what a piano is. I like to use things that you recognize. I don't have to explain what that thing is to you. So I'm constantly picking out objects that are in the world that we're living and that are not objects that I would go to the art shop to find. I went to the art shop to get this special thing and sort of, I made this thing out of gold and jewels and bronze. No, I made it out of newspapers and magazines and coat hangers and condoms. And these are things that exist around us. So that's important to me. They do have a kind of apocalyptic tsunami thing going on,
Well, I quite like the fact that the objects and also in other ones of this kind, they're heavy, big objects that you think couldn't be lifted easily, right? Yeah. But actually they're upended by featherweight things. It's just that there's millions of these featherweight things. So in newspapers or tickets or whatever it is, these themselves have hardly any weight, but it's the fact that they're en masse. Yeah. So there's something sort of interesting about I don't know if it's symbolism exactly, but there's a sort of metaphoric aspect that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, they're heavily kind of metaphorical in that sense. And again, I go back to Fife, and listening to the guys making bricks 2 doors along in a big old brickworks. The rumbling of that and the slag heap, the bang in front of that, and being able to play on that as a kid and looking into the huge doors, into the maws of these furnaces and stuff, and listening to this thing and imagining how something was made, how something was created, and knowing that my dad was in a mine that was ludicrously deep and halfway to Edinburgh by the time I got under the Firth of Forth. And you would spend like 3 hours getting to the pit face to actually work, and I'd be sitting as a kid picking at little bits of coal in his back at night that would fall from the roofs of the caves, I guess. There's something that needs to be, for me, talked about the materiality of all that stuff. I guess I've been surrounded by it, my whole life. I mean, right to the point where I was talking to some of the students at ESOP about being on the beach and talking about lightweight. I mean, walking into a ball of har, walking into a floating ball of har that was, like, 6 inches deep off the coast, sort of thing. And you're only walking in 6 inches of water, so it's not far out. You have to sort of walk out into the sea to find this thing. You walk into that ball of har and you see nothing but white. You're in heaven. You can't hear anything. You're getting sort of tingled with the kind of water that har thing is made up of. And then as you walk along the coast, because the wind's blowing it, it dissipates. Now that was made of something, and you're, as in my head, in the same way as I didn't really talk about it very well, because they jump from har to underground coal to using the things that I do. It's really hard to connect.
It's in the vein of minerals and actual physical substance and phenomena that's in life, right?
Yeah, it's the understanding of it somehow or other. As a sculptor, that's a really important thing, I think. Yeah, you're not just kind of, because I would get that a lot. I use so many different materials. We were working, crazily on stupid numbers of exhibitions and making crazy. Quite often I would make things. 1 week I'd be working in the back of Beyond in Brno in Slovakia, in a tiny wee place, and saying to my wife, let's get the fuck out of here before they find out what we've made. And then we'd be going to a much bigger city, and it'd be a one-man show in a big exhibition. You'd be using something else. I was using these things hard and fast, and just enjoying the exploration and needing to have that kind of relationship with, because I guess you're finding yourself, but like all artists, you look for yourself all the time. So yeah, I mean, they're a big adventure, these things with the materials. I can't stop it now. I've still got that same bug, that same need to to involve myself with it. Right.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Gwen. That's really
great. Hi, David.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm still hanging on in there, mate. Sorry about that. Listen, question really, I mean, you're an amazing artist, I have to say. The range of your work is absolutely amazing. And you do a couple of things that are particularly amazing. One is that it can be incredibly funny, which I find very difficult to make art that's funny, but powerful at the same time. But it's also very serious, and there's a tension in your work, which is constantly moving. It seems to me. In the first works that we were looking at, I joined the meeting a little bit late, about 7:15, but we were looking at those amazing tree forms that you take off the beach and stuff, which I would find would completely perplex me. Yeah, because they have a natural beauty, which you don't, which would intimidate me, I have to say. But you then add these screws and nails into them, and they become transformed.
64.
Yeah, for me, it's a funny thing, because I walked past some of these bits of wood for 10 or 12 years before I suddenly decided that they were interesting enough to work with. So I regard myself as a bit slow.
Well, the point is, they look actually like slow works, which is kind of curious, and they look like human figures to me. I find them astonishing. They're like details of Michelangelo's sculpture. They're just incredible, suggestive of anatomy and all sorts of things. They're incredible pieces of work, and I'm just baffled, really, because there's so much quality in your work. Why are we not seeing more of you?
I'd agree with that.
Find strange. You have to answer that one, David.
When's your retrospective at the RA or the Tate?
Well, who knows? Maybe one day. But I think it's interesting what you say about the figurative sort of thing, the body thing. Because I think those bits of wood when I finally decided I'm looking at these things in detail, it's like looking under somebody's oxter or behind an ear. They're really incredibly kind of personal kind of spaces, you know. And when I'm making the big newspaper installation, the same thing happens with that. I'm finding myself working on forms that are just incredibly human, and there's something about being human that is so much more interesting than anything else. And that's where humor comes in, where you make contact, where you show somebody something, you try to say something, you're not trying to make somebody understand something.
Yeah.
You're just trying to talk to them. You know, you've got these things to say. And the being funny thing was a problem for years, because by God, it wasn't a kind of welcome thing in the art world. If you were funny at all, you were regarded as not very, very serious, are you? I think, well, no, it's funny. It's becoming slightly more acceptable now with Grayson and guys like that. But I like the best thing about making a work of art and in amongst people is that proximity to everybody else, and I love the looks on people's faces. What the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And what the hell is he? And what the hell? Because I'm actually thinking, what the fuck is this? And what the hell is going on here? And it's a kind of a puzzle, you know. And it's part of us both doing a wee dance together, me, you, the audience, try to figure out what's going on here. But it doesn't have to be kind of a conclusive, you know. It can be an ongoing thing.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, David. And humor, funny is good. Shakespeare's funny, and it doesn't have to be all tragedy. And I think often humor is or that kind of lightness of touch is something that people often miss. But it can be fantastic. Open up the sort of the response. The one exhibit of yours that I remember, just the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life, is the trophy room.
Oh yeah.
At Kilkenny, and it was just. I remember showing another artist who was into that experience. He just completely disintegrated into laughter. I've never seen anything like it in his life, and it is a profound. It's a funny work, but it's also making a very serious point. So,
David, can I ask that you can talk about making those laser cut trees for Venice? You did that subversive thing of taking a bonsai tree, a very small bonsai tree, and making it into a giant steel thing. Would you like to talk about that, as it's 30 years this weekend that these were installed?
I've got some images of that, but I don't know where they are in the park.
I think they're coming up soon, actually. There's an image coming up soon.
We'll talk about them when they come up, Claire. Right?
Okay, yeah, sure.
I've got them in there. Yeah. Let's have a look. What's actually there now? I've got no idea where the hell we are. But let's have a look at some images, and we'll get past these things. I made endless numbers of these things. They couldn't, they were going to have to shoot me to stop me building those things in galleries. That was actually the last one. If you go back there, that one's called Bangers and Mash, and it was in this beautiful gallery in Glasgow, Goma in Glasgow, which was it's a glorious building. And I thought I'm going to make something there, and it's going to ruffle feathers, and it's going to make it look drastic. There's going to be a clash. When we built that, it fitted in like this elegant kind of same coloured thing as the building, And we would talk to the Glaswegians. Were great fun to talk to when we were making. There was a wee woman came in with she must have been about 85, but 4'6", which is tall for a Glaswegian, and. She had a pair of white silk gloves on, and she'd bring us sandwiches and stand there holding them in her hands and feed us while we made this sculpture. And she was cultured beyond anything that I'll ever achieve at all. Yeah? And I really like that contact. There's a kind of if you can make people laugh, or you can make people weep, where you can make people tear their hair out. Actually, I used to say one of my finer point, with my, an ability that I have is to be really fucking irritated. I used to irritate the hell out of a enough like folk. I quite like that. I would settle for that, but doing the other things, making them laugh and making them sort of thing, making them gnash their teeth all at the same time, and then make them throw money if you can actually manage to do that too. All important. And Glasgow's a kind of centre for something like that. I think that gallery in particular is pretty fantastic. But I mean, I'm still in the middle of it. I'd be making these things, and I'd be knackered making things with newspapers and magazines. And I'd be searching around, thrashing around for other materials. And there's me sending out messages to, well, actually then you just phone up companies. Because I think the next few images I've got, there's dolls and stuff like that. Let's have a look at them. Yeah, so these are Cindy dolls that I got 400 or 500 of from Pedigree Toys. I made this thing called Paradise in Manchester. Actually, I don't remember that. And I remember phoning this guy up saying, I'd like 400 of your dolls. Is there any chance I can get some of that and make that work? And he said, yes. What would you like Cindy to wear? You know? And I'm thinking, I hadn't really thought about this. What did Cindy actually wear? And actually, brilliantly, the guy just sent me all these dolls with cars and horses and all sorts of stuff, and the catalogues, obviously. And I discovered that Cindy didn't actually have any working clothes. She only had the thing that she could play in. So the nearest I could get, because I wanted her to do this. I wanted her to do this little performance piece of, kind of contemporary caryatid holding something up, And I'd imagined myself making a film of these 400 dolls carrying these baths into this gallery and just kind of positioning themselves and finding a great place to be. And you'd all get all these little legs moving like centipedes and stuff like that. But I mean, it would have been crazy making that film. We never actually made it. But I went on to use Barbie dolls. And this is Geneva. It's a gallery in Geneva. But we made this this is called No Rest for the Wicked. And we've used Barbie instead of Cindy this time. And I was quite kind of puzzled between the kind of differences in the construction of this doll, whereas Cindy could actually open her legs. She could embrace, whereas Barbie can only kind of do this kind of walking sort of thing. I'd find myself involved in these sculptures. I make loads of sculptures with that kind of material. And I'd sell these pieces, and they'd be in sort of private collections and whatnot. And that was a staircase made of granite, which you could walk up. Mm-hmm. And there was like a performance in that. So it's quite an elaborate thing, And I'd really make sort of serious works of art, I thought, of that stuff. And I would just go on and on gathering things around me. If you look at it, there's more of this stuff. There's Barbie, who I had to actually buy. I remember we made little kind of metal armatures for the granite to be held up. But Barbie doesn't have she doesn't have an inside. You can't get inside Barbie. So we had to buy cheap dolls and put Barbie's head on it to sort of cover that, which I thought was really quite interesting. But and I remember sort of a line underneath that sculpture and thinking to myself, because at that point, Pedigree Toys had been taken over by Mattel. Now that I think of it, so Barbie had bought Cindy. Barbie, the American doll, had bought Cindy, the British doll. And I'm lying there thinking, I wonder if there's a board meeting going on now discussing the future changes of that doll. And some guy saying, do you think Barbie should open her legs like that British split Cindy? I don't think so. Anyway, so I got all these bears as well. I've still got some of these yet. I'd made this kind of I was making these kind of, I remember sort of getting into a terrible argument with a Mancunian artist comparing this to Michelangelo's Prisoners, stuff like that, and that carving, the stone, And I was trying to get that pathos. I thought I was trying to get that kind of feeling from something, a sort of real thing. You really felt something for this, I mean, I'm terrible for that. I can sit and watch the telly at night and weep for about 2 hours just watching adverts. If there's if it's just a kid looking happy because his mum's made him a nice sort of a plate of tomato soup, I'll get all emotional and start to bubble up, So I'm a bit kind of soft like that. And I like that kind of. It's not schmaltz or something that's deeper than that. And these pieces with the bears were something to do with that thing. But I don't know if you were kind of going too far ahead of yourself with that. If you go to the next slide, let's have a look at what's there. They were like if you watch, look at buildings and you see a beautifully sort of modelled figures holding up a balcony. They were kind of meant to be something like that. You know? It was that exhibition was called "If You Go Down to the Woods Today." No. We must be getting to when we get to Venice soon, Claire. It's coming up. Well, yeah, I remember. Yeah, eventually after I got all these beers, I started making kind of what I thought might be a product. So I invented the opposite of the Care Bear. This was the Don't Give a Fuck Bear. And I made a whole kind of a series of them. And there was a second series called the Grizzly Little Fuckers as well. But I mean, these were really when you're moving around in circles where you're bumping into Nick Sirota and guys, and you're making the Don't Give a Fuck bears. It's really not going down all that well. You know?
Yeah.
Next one. The mother's got one. Get back! He's got a Kenwood chefette.
Kenwood chef.
This is Alison asked me to put in. This is a show I did at the Tate before it changed into the Tate we know now. That show was called 101 Dalmatians, and it was we sort of made this live in front of the audiences, and they would come in and watch us doing things. So it was a fascinating thing to be in that place and have people sort of standing around you. I remember getting into terrible trouble arguing with the staff there. Actually, it was Frances Morris who was there then. She was in a much more lowly position there. Great woman. But we were arguing about, she wanted to put signs up all over the place explaining the thing. I thought, fuck, I hate that. I don't want people walking into galleries and reading signs. I want people to come in and look at what the hell I'm doing, and not to be afraid of that. Some of when people came into this place, this Tate Gallery, which was provided for art, it was made to hold the stuff. And you're going to come in and get yourself ready to go and look at it. You can't bring yourself to do that in a straightforward fashion without reading a fucking bit of a bit of information. There's something kind of wrong with that for me, And I'd get that same thing as the newspaper pieces, where I'd feel the guy breathing in the back of my neck, and after a week, he'd approach and say, "What are you doing?" And I'm saying, "Well," and I'm thinking to myself, "Well, this is the Tate Gallery. You're in a Tate Gallery. I'm making a work of art. And what are you making it with?" Same question. And I'm standing with a Dalmatian dog under my arm, with cutting into that thing to make it hold a TV. And I'm thinking, my God, this is just really bizarre. That guy then, you walked into the Tate and there was a massive Henry Moore at the front door, great big thing about the size of half a bus. He's just walked past that to get to me. What does he think? That Henry Moore was digging in his garden one day and hit a big lump of metal? Ooh, I'll pull that out and put it on a plinth, yeah? And he didn't, what were you planning to go to Sainsbury's but used the wrong door? There's something going on there that's quite odd, So I became quite obsessed with that. And actually, from that was that very first image I showed you where I had I was a nervous young student actually approaching a woman with a pram saying, "Excuse me, Mrs., would you like to see my sculpture?" Which is just daft, right along to the Tate Gallery where I want to speak to you about this thing, but I don't seem to be able to get you to kind of look at it in the way you think there's a way of looking at this. There's not. You just have to be alive on the planet. And you can say it's crap or shit or whatever. You can say many things and we'll live with it, But I think we're at Venice now. Let me have a look. Let's see. Yeah, there you go. Here's us at Venice. This is thanks to Claire. And not very many other people, actually. There's my wife in the picture there. Well, there's Les in the black trousers. Right. And there's me. I think I must be. Yeah, I'm up the top there, at the top of the back of this giant bonsai tree. It's the first time and the only time I think that Scotland actually exhibited the Venice Biennale proper. so it was a big thing. It's quite a big thing. I think we'd just been in Chicago, and we were on our way to Tokyo, and I think this was in the middle of that. And we'd been arranging this sculpture for some time before that. And we did, it's that weird thing where you're a Scottish artist, you don't want to be seen, even bizarrely, you don't want to be seen as a Scottish artist, so you pick something kind of slightly crazy, like a bonsai tree, which really shouldn't have much to do with you. And you go off in that direction, trying to. I think that may have something to do with my dad, who was my mum and dad were both very eccentric. My dad, Polish, having been at the age of 18, was in a labour camp in Siberia for 2 years before he was sentenced to 10 years hard labour as a spy in there, and had goodness knows how many adventures right through his life until he eventually became a miner in his life. It was eccentric beyond belief, and would say things to people just to see what they thought, that weren't necessarily true or were just outrageous. And I think I've got a bit of that in me. And he was a very eccentric man, a very powerful man. My mother, just as eccentric, who treated us to a free education of fabulous music of every kind you could think of. We had to have music and drama in our house all the time. She was a dramatic soul. She'd been sold as a baby in a pub, and we would live with these two kind of nutters, basically. So actually, I'm a mild kind of watered down version of those guys. I end up in Venice with my bonsai trees. I've got another image there. Another one. They were quite large things. They were quite heavy metal. I wanted them to be heavy metal, kind of disgruntled with the idea of being bonsais. Anyway, that's me, actually. My God, look at that. And it was a spectacular thing to be able to pull off, I think. I think we didn't realise just how good that was. I don't think we appreciated that at the time. I mean, I was moving from place to place to place, and trying to take that into my stride and try to do the best job I could. But it was actually significant for us to be there. Well, I think there's a couple of shots of Arthur. Now that's oh God, what the hell is her name?
Kate Whiteford.
Kate's, yeah, if you go to the next one, that's Kate's work. I thought Kate's work was magnificent, actually. I thought that was a really fine piece.
Yeah.
Right in the centre of the gardens, beautifully made. It was a kind of gravel thing, cut out of the ground there, gorgeous looking thing. It worked very well, I thought that. But we didn't have a pavilion, but we had a presence that were making these things. And then Arthur Watson, I think we couldn't. We've only shot we've got of him. I think it's the next one.
Karen's asking, what's this tree made out of?
The tree was a half-inch thick steel, just regular steel plate. Yeah. We had a laser cut in Aberdeen, of all places. I don't know why we had to do it in Aberdeen, but I do remember being up there in the shipyards with some crazy American guy who was actually paying for quite a large chunk of it. Working on the design, and it's the only place I remember sort of flying to and the plane coming down, and the pot was something the guy at the airplane took off again. I was like, oh my God, I'm too young to die. And it went round the airport and came back and landed again. But here's Kate's piece. That's a very fine thing. That's a very, and then Arthur, who, if you go to the next slide, had a kind of set of kind of garments, I guess, that he printed. He printed these things up, but they arrived late, and he was quite pissed off. Arthur, I remember, he was quite kind of he threw quite a hissy fit when we were putting these things up, and we helped him to get this thing together. Look at, there's a young, gorgeous Claire Henry there. 1990, my God. Yeah.
Those were the days. Those were the days.
Yeah.
But it was the first, David, it's still the only time that Scotland was represented at the Venice Biennale in the official Biennale, in the official Giardini, in the official catalogue. It's the only time in 125 years. And it was you and Kate and Arthur. You know, it was, and the Scottish Sculpture Trust. It was amazing that it happened. I mean, when you look back, no
Barbara
money.
Griggers,
We had no.
yeah.
Barbara Griggers. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and they kind of refuse to recognise it now because they talk about the first time Scotland for the Venice Biennale.
They still
Next time, it's very funny, you know. It's very easy to be unpopular in Scotland.
Yes. They've got it. I have managed this year to get, that's 30 years this weekend, to actually get a whole thing on Creative Scotland's website. That's you know, and that took a lot of effort, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, I've been asked to exhibit. I was laughing at this. I got an email from an outfit, I forget what it's called, something. They asked me to exhibit my sculpture, which I thought was my architecture. They asked me to exhibit my architecture. I'm thinking, my architecture? You know, I've got one building on the go. Yeah. But this is in Venice. They've asked me to show that in Venice. You know. So
Okay.
From Palazzo in Venice. I'm hoping in August, September to be showing architecture in Venice. Yeah, so that'll be I haven't actually been to Venice for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, I mean, I'm sure you'll find this. I know that Adrian will too. You wander around the art world, and there's a hell of a lot of things that you can't stomach. You know, there's an awful lot of different things, a lot of snobberies and ideas and ludicrousness and lack of wit and self-importance and tosspots. You know, just crazy things that you got to deal with. There you are, you've been instructed to kiss, somebody on the arse because it might do you some good. You mark the fucking arse with a spot and I'll have a go at it. But, finding that by yourself as Hughie O'Donoghue, Adrian Wisniewski or David Mach is a difficult fucking thing. You know, so, Venice really brought that home to me. What I saw in Venice was really difficult for me to swallow. And actually, I've struggled with it every year for the last 30 or 40 years, dealing with the art world and all of those things that I don't like about the contemporary art world, of which there are many. You meet great artists like Adrian and Hughie, you meet lots of great people in it, and you meet other things as well.
It's actually very difficult, and I think that one of the legacies of the 20th century is that there's been a kind of slippage of one of the kind of motifs of the 20th century is the sort of the avant-garde artist,
Yeah.
David Hockney's often talked very negatively about the avant-garde. It's sort of part of the French cavalry regiment, basically. But the avant-garde arrived in the 20th century. But one of the things that's happened is there's been a transfer of power in the art world. And that's quite a complex thing, but the people who've definitely lost power are the actual people who make art. And, there was a part in the mid-20th century when artists were very powerful, people like Picasso, even though at the Royal Academy, we said we'd kick him up the arse if we saw him in the street. And we've been trying to live that down ever since. But I think there has been a massive transfer of power from artists to bureaucrats.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I think we'll have to have a big battle very, very soon to try and sort that out. I don't like that. I don't think that's right. Actually, I do remember years and years ago talking to some guy who was going to be sitting in the first class of a jumbo jet on his way to Tokyo, and he was a curator for a museum, a public art gallery funded by us. And the work was going to be being travelled exotically, sort of wrapped in sort of fantastically expensive cases, and so on down the line until they got to the artist who was invited to sort of travel, Pindejo Jerkov class, sort of like to get to wherever the hell he was going. And I'm thinking, fuck, there's something wrong with this. The pecking order is completely wrong. And that's like, I remember that 4 years ago. That was Richard Calva Caresti going to Tokyo or something. something like that. And I thought I'm not having this, you know. But we're still fighting with that. Now we have a kind of crazy situation with it's a music. It's happened to music as well, where never feels. Sorry. Did somebody say something else? I'm rambling. Oh.
Sorry, Hugh. Were you saying something?
Right, you go.
All right, go on, David. Go on.
I'm going.
Okay.
I've lost my train of thought. Like, here you go. Where are you, Huey?
Can we go back to the?
I lost my train, David. Still. Fred. Lost my thread or lost the train. I wasn't interrupting there. That was. Sorry. I'm sorry about this.
Right.
Where the discussion had reached where you're talking about the creative aspect of the industry has lost its power to the bureaucrats. And
I can talk a little bit about that. Yeah, I really think, you know, I don't want to be pointing the finger too much, but the dominance of conceptual art has led exactly to what David was talking about earlier about you going into museums and reading the labels, reading the thing. This mediation of a work of art has become commonplace, and therefore, you know, the people who really control that, the interpretation of works of art, are the people who write these labels or they write the commentary. And I think that a lot of artists, some of whom are quite sort of shy individuals, who are quite meditative, they make their art, and that is their statement. And often they can't articulate it too clearly, but they actually have made their art, they've made their work. And I think this mediation is part of the problem. And conceptual art has contributed to that, because it actually removes the power away from the object or the thing that's been made or whatever. And you know, I'm not in any way a kind of Luddite. I don't believe that, you know, that we should be censoring any idiom of art, any form of art. But when the written word takes precedence, or the spoken word, we're visual artists primarily, you know, and my work, and I think David's work as well, lives in that realm of the visual. And some of the humor I was talking about it is, or you know, the beauty that's in it is you have to get it, but you have to experience it before it's been explained.
Mm. Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. You know. There's also a thing. There's far too much of making everything cheap. You know.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with that. There's you know, you get musicians who can play, you know, a band that can play like Led Zeppelin or something like that. Yeah. You get dozens of them. They'll be lucky if they get a couple of $100 for playing a pub. Yeah. You know, because so many of these there are talents that are kind of abused like that. In the name of somebody like Simon Cowell, kind of you know, pushing half a dozen guys that have got no fucking music in their makeup whatsoever, and we're listening. We're kind of taken over by stuff like that. Anyway, so it's very odd to see that. I'm amazed at that. And I've been actually with music. I always liked music for. If I go to a pub or if I go to a concert, if I'm sitting in front of a stage listening and watching whoever's playing there, I'm going to make a decision about that very quickly in the pub. You know, I'm going to say they're shit,
yeah,
or they're great, or going to employ. And the people who are sitting next to me, who you know, don't play music, they listen to music like I do. They don't claim to be experts, etc. But they will make that decision. They will make that judgment. They will call that. You know, you walk into an art gallery, and you'll have two people saying,
Yes.
I know. Think that's any good? Do you think, you know, let's have a look over here. You know, you don't have to do it with music. You can tell instantly that something is lying to you, or sort of bullshit, or what the hell ever. Mm-hmm. Art worries the hell out of me when it is able to go beyond that. You know, and the people that you're talking about, you can manipulate that quite a lot, as a matter of fact. You know, so, but I mean, yeah, maybe you're always fighting it. I don't know. You know?
Maybe it's always been like that, but I actually think it hasn't.
Mhm.
I think it's particularly like that now. It's like we won the revolution. But
So
the
just to ask the two of you, because and I'll try and pose this question as a layperson, just to ask the two of you, and I probably also want to know what Gwen Hardy thinks of this. Also, is the question you're saying is, look, we've got a creative person who's being who's actually the primary function of this whole industry, and we've got the bureaucrats, as you call them. Where does the layperson come into this, where they understand that they actually need to refocus their attention on the creative person, on the musician, or on yourselves as artists, and then you can have the goods flow to your direction? How do you turn this tide? Because some of us will maybe listening to this conversation and thinking, well, this sounds like politics. You see what I mean? I'm sorry to put it, but as I'm playing the devil's advocate here, you know. But I think you understand where I'm coming from. So how? And you mentioned David, you did mention that there has to be a fight, even at the Royal Academy level, where you present this argument back to the industry and say, listen, we need to change. How do you go about it then?
Well, I think we've lost the ability to kind of. I think I come from a place where I'm still dealing with that guy that said, you know, while I'm making a hot piece of avant-garde, he said I thought I was making a bridge for the squirrels, and that it was a put down as well as like an interpretation. You know, get a grip of yourself, son. You know, we can think about this for ourselves and make our own kind of judgments, and we have to have that critical eye. The guy wasn't being. He was actually. It was quite an interesting sort of engagement with that guy. I thought about that for years because he stood and looked for a long time, and he considered. He did the things that I wanted him to do. He didn't sort of just happen by and sort of glance at the side of his eyes. He watched and he looked, and I could tell he was thinking. You know, he was doing all that sort of stuff, and he was kind of putting me in my place a bit as well. And we need to have our politicians, our politics are just terrible just now. You know, we've got people lying, you know, all over the place about all sorts of things, and we need to correct that too. So art, you know, is is another level of that thing, but it does need to be addressed. I don't know. I don't know where that's going. I know that I see plenty of good art still. You know, there's still plenty of good things I consider to be great art, and I know I meet masters. I know I meet people who are exceptionally good at what they do. You know. And I think it's important to have them and to recognise them. How you interfere. I mean, Huey and I are going kind of big battle at the minute with bureaucracy, and we're trying to kind of do something about that. How you actually manage to achieve it, I don't know, because the thing that I like to do best, and maybe this is a weakness, is make my art. I like doing that. I don't want to deal with the kind of the bureaucrats or the bureaucracy or the politicians. I just want to get on with it. You know, and maybe we just need more people doing that thing, you know. But don't interfere. I mean, actually, it's funny because I was never bolshy as a young man. No, and I'm getting bloody bolshy now. You know, as I get older, I'm ready to kind of say things that I would have been unable to say when I was in my 20s. No, I'm not. That's, you know, complete shit. That's not how I talk about it. And we're faced with done deals a lot of the time. Maybe that's what Huey's talking about as well in terms of art. This is a done deal. This is good. We've decided this is good. You just need to get in line and applaud. You know, we need to be able to criticise that kind of thing. We need to do it in life. We need to do it in politics. We need to do it in art, in all sorts of places. So I'm there with that, feeling a bit stupid because I should have done that, you know, when I was in my 20s rather than when I was in my 60s. Yeah. But I'm rambling now. I'm sorry, but I've just noticed the time.
Okay, I'll try and my tuppence worth. I mean, one thing I'm thinking of is, do you see this symbol here, right? And then like this. So basically, I think the pyramid thing has really affected the art world. So you've got like these superstars, just a few of them at the top, and generating vast amounts of money for their gallerists, and then the sort of the you know, there's a sort of what used to be a lot more democratic, has that the sort of middle, you know, most of us who are sort of working very authentically and in art, you know, might have had more of a somehow a supportive platform, and now we're very. I think it's a kind. I don't know how that relates exactly to the, you know, conceptual art and being told what to think rather than what to feel visually, but to my mind, the whole thing's a gamble anyway. You know, it's like the shifting sands. I mean, I know in my own life, you know, I've been cast this way and that way, and I've often thought, oh, that's interesting. Is that the way I see myself? You know, how I'm being described, or how, rather, my art is being described. I've always been aware of a disconnect. Sometimes it's like this, and it's right, and sometimes it's really out of step, the way the public view you and the way that your work is actually, or at least the way you perceive your own work. To me, the whole thing is a shifting sands. It's very unstable, and I think you know what David was saying, and also Adrian earlier, is that, you know, the kernel in all of this crazy shifting sands and gamble stuff is your own interest in what you're doing, and it's just amazing that you, in part, there is so much. There's a sort of infinite capacity to develop. I actually still feel that in my ripe old age. I still feel that you can get into the present moment and be like a scientist almost, a kind of creative scientist, not knowing the solution to your endeavors today. And yet you're going to put every fiber of your body and your intellect and your emotions into it. And it's interesting, you know, no matter. So I sort of, but to address these other issues, I mean, I also really don't like being told, you know, how to view something in a museum or whatever. But I will say this, that because art has become so so sort of differentiated from one practice to another, I've found myself sometimes reading these labels in museums about the artist and the philosophy that or their thought process and the practical stuff, and it's actually helped me sometimes. So there you are. But I don't generally like text as a mediating factor.
Well,
Thank you, Gwen.
you covered a lot of ground there. There's a hell of a lot of things to think of. It really is. You know, you become a kind of, because we're philosophizing all the way along the line as well. We can't help ourselves. But there are lots of artist curses, I think, you know, and you're so deep into the damn thing that you should be taken away in a straitjacket every sort of afternoon, because for God's sake, get a grip. You know, you don't have to kind of. I mean, I often sort of shout at myself, "Pull out, Dave! Pull out! You're in too deep." You know, just to kind of sort of try and relax a bit. Because we do take ourselves, and we take what we make very, very seriously. You know? I mean, you can reduce an artist to tears at a dinner. You know, you can have quite a lot of fun with that. So what kind of work do you need? Oh yeah. Oh, so do you have a catalogue? Do you have a book? Do you have a book? Yeah. Oh my God. Well, that sounds fantastic. Your work. You should have a book. No. How much do you sell your work for? Well, you sell it for that one. God, you should sell it for more than that. What kind of gallery do you have? Which gallery represents you? Oh my God, you should have a book. You can go all the way down the line with all these things. You can make a poster of this stuff. You can actually distribute it to artists and have them kind of throw darts in their studio. You know. And
I just say, David, Annette Kobach, I was a journalist and also on our board. She's saying in chat, wish we were all in the same room. The middlemen were taking over. It happened at the BBC in the 90s too. So
the BBC's crap. Really, come on. I mean, my God, you know, I didn't think I'd ever be able to say that. But our press, our newspaper, our TV, who the hell are these guys? You know, there's something wrong with all that stuff. It's just there's something terribly, terribly wrong, you know, with the occasional okay thing. And it's you have to sit down in front of your TV and think, is this because I'm 60? What the hell age am I? 64. Because I'm 64 and I'm just an old grumpy git. Or are you actually sort of pointing out something real, you know? Yeah. So I like arguing with my daughter about all that stuff, because there are lots of things apart from that I can't say now. And whereas we, I guess, we're looking at all the faces on the screen of an age where we could say what the hell we like, and you'll have to listen to it. We have a voice, you know. And I think we need that more than ever. And actually, maybe art is very, very, I mean, my God, who would have thought we would have made so much money? The last 15, 20 years have been ridiculous. Artists have been made in millionaires, you know? When I left art college, you could count the collectors in London on the fingers of one hand, you know? The number of opportunities, the galleries and so on, that's changed dramatically to what we have to, actually today we're having a problem, you know? But 8 years ago, it was still jumping and still incredible, and things were going great. And so I feel kind of slightly spoiled rotten by the whole thing. I feel that there are lots of things I want to address, and because I'm an old white man, I've got that to deal with.
So let me pose another question, because we've obviously talked about that. But do you believe, like, with the advent of the modern technology, and I pose this to yourself, to Huey, I know AJ is also here. I pose it to the three of you. With the advent of technology and the democratization of thought through social media, Twitter, Instagram, and all that, and the ability of many creative people like yourselves being able to promote their work, do you think there'll be a change in the industry? Do you think there'll be opportunities that will open up? Maybe that maybe didn't open to you because maybe you had to deal with specific galleries, or, as you said earlier on, David, very few collectors.
Can I say something about that?
Yes.
Well, I think I always think about how things changed in Scotland about early 1980s, because we started getting direct flights from Glasgow to New York, whereas before you had to go through London. And it was a bit like that with the art world. You had to get a rubber stamp. You had to get your art passport stamped in London before you can go anywhere else, which meant that you were being censored in a way. What attracted me, I recognised, first of all, when I first saw David's work, that was in 1982 at the New 57 Gallery, was not the humour but the wit. There's a wit which excites me, which I don't find necessarily very British. I don't see David as a very British artist. I see him as a very international artist. And when I've always thought of David's work, I've thought more people like, I've written them down, Christo, Oldenburg, Carl Andre, Donald Judd, rather than that historic. Our historians like to draw a straight line, and they drew one from Henry Moore and said he's the great sculptor of the 20th century and he's British, and so they drew a line through Moore to Caro and to the new British sculptors. David's not of that ilk. The only exception that amongst the British sculptors, I think, is maybe like Tony Cragg, who had a lot of humour in his early work, but he's from Liverpool, so you'd expect that with Jimmy Tarbuck, etc. I think the fact that David doesn't do work in bronze is something which is sniffed. People get sniffy about it because it's not real sculpture in that sense. But it does communicate more with an international audience, and I can understand why that platform is much more shown in Japan, shown in Los Angeles or whatever. But his work in London is probably not. He's a much better artist than he's been made out to be by the British establishment. Because
I was just thinking when you're talking about Los Angeles and different places. I remember I made a little sculpture in the ashtray of a Hillman imp. What the hell? Whose car was that? It was some guy famous. Oh yeah, it was Pulp, the band. Who's the guy?
I can't remember his name. The guy that jumped on the stage for the
the attack. What's his name? The black
Michael Jackson, the guy.
Yeah, I remember making a tiny little Greek temple, tiny wee carters I'd bought over a whole bunch of sort of cigarette ends and ash, making this thing very carefully. And those ashes that sort of slide in and out.
Yeah.
and a fucking helmet imp, which is what the last car they made in Scotland, thinking, you know, it's Tokyo.
Something Jarvis Cocker, is that who it is?
Jarvis Cocker. Jarvis Cocker's car.
Yes.
I'm reduced to making sculpture in the
Thanks from
Ashtrays.
Katie Willits, thank you.
Yeah.
David. To just trip back to Andrew's thing, are we a period of change? I think we actually are on the cusp of a period of change, which will be brought about largely by the events of this, the extraordinary events of this COVID-19 thing, which is going to change the landscape. But I think what I've lived through in my lifetime, I would describe as the period of the institutionalized revolution.
Yes.
And revolutions rarely change anything. They usually move the burden from one shoulder to another. And what we've institutionalized, if you think back 100 years or whatever to the 1880s, 1890s, when artists were developing a revolution, they were rebelling against something else, and modernism and postmodernism has become now kind of institutionalized. And my experience of being at Goldsmiths in the 1980s was shocking. And where you hear people in art school saying things like, "Well, you can't say that, and you can't think that." That's when the revolution has died on its feet, and it's time for a bit of fresh thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And
shall we open up to the rest of the audience to see whether there's any questions from them, please?
You people are amazing. I'm amazed you haven't all just buggered off. Do you realise how late it is? Jesus.
I just thought there might be someone with burning questions. So if you do have a question, we can take a few. Just lift up your hands and we'll come through the viewants and you find out. So anyone with a question, please lift your hand up, please. It's now open to everyone. And I'm just going to go down the line, just checking. Not all of you have your pictures up. So Marlo, you wanted to say something? Just unmute you. Yeah, go ahead.
can you spotlight as well, Andrew?
Yes,
Hey.
spotlight. Yes. So who's asking the question, please?
Oh, I am. I just want to know what's kept you going all these years. I know you've already said you just kept going bigger and bigger, but you haven't really stopped. So what's the motivation?
David.
I don't know. I think that I feel driven. I think it's one of the reasons I like artists, you know. Artists will do crazy things. And they'll do things that they're advised not to do. They'll do things that their wife, their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their partner says, if you do that again, I'm not actually coming back to the house, you know. They'll just keep doing things because they have to do that stuff. And they can't help it. And I really I kind of admire them for that. I don't always like what they do, but I recognise their passion, and I think we kind of need that in the world, you know. So it's great fun. These are really interesting people. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to ask a question as well.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
You know when you do your projects, how do you get the stuff inside of the wood or whatever you're using?
Well, I get a whole lot of people to help me do that. Absolutely, because there's a lot of stuff. Yeah. Well, you got the book. Look at that. It's great. Yeah. You need to have
I've met you before.
I recognise you actually. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Question, please. Raise your hands, please. And I'll just go quickly through. I'm not. Have I missed anyone out? Okay. Right. I think we've come to an end then. David?
Well, we must be all thinking, thank God.
I'll just put everything back to the gallery.
Were there a few more images that we could whiz through, Andrew? Just the last ones?
Do you want us to go through the last images?
That's quite a while we're ahead.
Right.
Actually, I did want to say one thing. When you actually look behind you and said, I'm just going to get some advice on something, Andrew, earlier when we started, I thought you were talking to the elephant.
Oh, I see. You mean my friend over here?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
from our trip to South Africa, yeah.
I think this is, well, he's an elephant in South Africa, and I'm a great supporter of elephants. I can talk all day about this, so I won't, but I'll just say it's a creature that I love a lot. And I'm sure everybody is quite aware about what's going on with elephants. And being African and Kenyan, I take any opportunity to find a way to support this particular animal. That's why it's in my background. So don't worry, I'm not in the bush. And I'm quite safe where I am. Although earlier on I had considered using this particular image. Wow. I thought it might be a bit creepy. So I think you'll forgive me if I just go with the elephant for now.
Send that image to all the people we're talking about sorting out. We're coming to get you.
I particularly, every time I have this image, I keep looking behind because I'm African. When you see a lion, you know what to do. You don't wait around. So anyway.
I think you should take that giant poster off your bedroom wall, though. It would scale the shit and see what.
What about this one then? This is much more in line with the
vibes are in this year. Listen, can I thank everybody for being with us for such a long time?
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, just before we I would just like to take this opportunity to thank you, David, also. Thank you very much for taking your time out and actually going through extra time with us, and also thank everybody for staying with us. I think we've gone over by an hour. But David, once again, you've shown us and you've proved that you're a fountainhead of creativity. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. As an artist, and I think Hugh touched on that also. You're an amazing artist. You're a credit to your craft, you're a credit to the art industry. And for me, as a director of the ESOP School of Painting, I feel privileged having you teach, tutor, and even educate we who are in the art world also. On behalf of everyone, I'll just say thank you for what you've done today. I'm going to unmute everybody so at least you can hear the thunderous claps that are about to come your direction. If I can unmute everyone, and then we can, so give me a second, and there we are. You're all unmuted. Thank you so much, David. Stunning performance. Well done. Thank you very, very much.